Welcome to another episode of Wisdom and Wellness with Wit. Today's guest I'm really excited about. His name is Stephen Lewis, and he is a licensed psychotherapist who specializes in the topic of imposter syndrome. Now, my therapist got me onto him in around 2019, and I just eat up his content. Like the way in which he presents this topic of imposter syndrome is so applicable to all of us. And he makes it just so easy to understand. So I just really think you're going to learn a lot. I hope you enjoy this conversation with Stephen Lewis. Awesome. Well, welcome to another episode of Wisdom and Wellness with Wit. I am excited and very honored. Stephen Lewis, that you would come and just chat with me. Thanks so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes. I'm excited about this conversation and this topic because, we were talking before, and I know that you've entered a little bit of the chronic pain space and conversation, which is really cool. But I was just saying before we started, like there's a lot of you that are listening as well that are in the creative and the entrepreneurial space. And I think that this topic is just so good for everybody because I know every kind of human struggles with this, and it's wild. Like I was thinking about it, before we started, like it's wild how we spend a lot of our lives thinking about what we want to do and be when we grow up. We go to school or we go to some specialized kind of training or, getting involved in whatever it is that we want to do. We get the certificate, we get the graduate degree, and then we start doing what we want to do. And then there's a lot of us that begin to experience this, not phenomena, but this probably way of thinking that you are so brilliant in how you describe it, is imposterism or imposter syndrome, which it was just this morning I was like, man, I spent most of my life wanting to do something. I started doing it, and then I second guess if I'm supposed to be doing it.
Right. Like, make that make sense.
Make that make sense. Yeah. So can you give your definition of what imposterism, imposter syndrome is, and just how you started to either notice it in yourself, why you were drawn to this subject matter?
For sure. So you had it right when you said it's kind of a phenomenon. That's the, I guess, traditional term. It's called imposter phenomenon. So you were spot on with that wording. I think, popular culture has changed it to imposter syndrome, but and that's how we know it. And so that's kind of what I go off of. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you've nailed it. It's really this experience that people have where they are doing things well that they've worked mm-hmm. hard to be able to do. Mm-hmm. And for whatever reason, they are unable to connect with the idea that they're getting the results they worked hard to get. So you'll have folks that are in creative spaces or that are doing really well career-wise, mm-hmm. And excelling and succeeding, mm-hmm. and really feel like they're going to be found out to be a fraud, that they, for some reason, don't have exactly what it takes, and they fooled everyone into believing that they have the skills and talent that they've exhibited.
Yeah. Which is crazy. I was thinking about it. So, I've navigated chronic pain. My symptoms developed and they got the worst while I was on the biggest and the first international tour that I got for singing background vocals for a mega artist. And it was like, now that I look back, I'm like, it all makes just so much sense. But at the time I was like, oh my gosh, like, everybody is going to know, like, I can't do the job I was brought here to do, and they're going to fire me, and they're never going to ask me to, which of course just increased the physical symptoms that I was experiencing.
Right.
But yeah, that is just so wild. How did you get involved, like, into this idea of really wanting to learn this concept of, like, being a fraud?
Wow. So I don't know that I set out to learn this idea of, why people struggle with this. Mm-hmm. That would be too much like that I was so goal-oriented and directed that I knew exactly what I wanted to do. Mm-hmm. That may be true for becoming a therapist, but not so much for, focusing on imposter syndrome.
Okay.
I worked with couples and I was that was my shtick, right? Like I, marketed myself as a couples therapist, and I wanted to work with tons of couples, and excited about that coming out of graduate school. And then doing that work for some years, and I started to realize that like the clients that I really was kind of doing good work with, that I considered to be like transformative work, and I was really excited and happy to kind of meet with them, or this
Mm-hmm.
group of people who presented with the same kind of set of histories and issues, and so they
Mm-hmm.
were doing amazing things in life, and for whatever
Mm-hmm.
reason they just crippled with like self-doubt. This
Yeah.
idea that at some point somebody's going to figure them out and they'll be exposed as not really
Mm-hmm.
being as talented as they really are. And to me, that
Yep.
was just kind of mind blowing, because I'm like, you are doing phenomenal things. Like, how are you not
Yeah.
dialed into the idea that you got it? Like, you
Right.
have it. You are doing it. People would love
Yeah.
to have the opportunities you have. They would love to be getting the
Mm-hmm.
results you're getting. And for them, it was
Mm-hmm.
just like crippling fear. They were just like, oh my
Yeah.
God, like the more I keep doing
Yeah.
stuff, the harder I have to work to keep fooling people.
Yeah.
Kind of not really, but like that's kind of where they
Mm-hmm.
lived. And so I just
Mm-hmm.
kind of, I think looking at the histories that they had that were shared, and
Mm-hmm.
it really was just like, yo, I've got to figure this thing out. And start, as I started
Mm-hmm.
kind of researching it more and looking into it, I was like, oh, there's a
Mm-hmm.
whole name for this thing. And this was like back in
Yeah.
2017. And I was like, oh,
Wow.
this is it. These are my people. I only
Yeah.
want to kind of work with them.
Wow. That's that's really cool. It have you found it helpful to have, so I've talked and posted a little bit about imposter syndrome as I learned it, because my chronic pain therapist, who who's a part of the Pain Psychology Center, she's who sent me your stuff. Like after one of our first sessions, she's like, "You need to get into this guy." I was like, "Who is this?" He is wild, just because the way that you present it is
Yeah.
just for the average human.
Yeah.
It's you don't have to be a therapist or a scientist or whatever. And I lost my train of thought as I was talking about
That's
it.
a really great compliment. Like, so I'm really happy you're saying that, because when I
Yeah.
started out as a therapist, my goal was to make the complex understandable or easily understandable.
Yeah.
So whenever someone
Yeah.
says like, yeah, it wasn't rocket science, like the way you phrased it or said it really just
Mm-hmm.
kind of made sense. And I'm like, thank you. Like, that's the idea. I don't want,
Mm-hmm.
us to kind of get caught up into the weeds of, or
Mm-hmm.
psychobabble of what something is. And, you
Totally.
aren't really engaging in the metacognitive process. And it's like, well,
Right.
okay, I'm not sure what that is.
You're
It's like,
like,
nah,
Meta? Is that
you
Facebook?
right,
Is
right.
that what
And all
it
I'm really saying is like, you just don't think about
is?
your
Yeah.
thinking enough. You don't question it enough.
Yeah.
Like, that's easier to
Yeah.
understand. So thank you for that
Totally.
compliment. I really
Oh
appreciate that.
yeah. Well, I appreciate it because I love science and I love like the brain science, but like I also love to turn my brain off and
Yeah,
not
yeah,
have to
yeah.
think
There you go.
about stuff being presented to me. Have you found it helpful? Obviously, you were talking about the term change and like the definition change. So the couple times I've posted, people have been like, "Are we just labeling everything now? Like, are we just trying to make an excuse for like everybody feels insecure sometimes, like why are we giving it, have you
Mhm.
found it, obviously you found it helpful, can we over identify with language to a way to where it's just like, hey, I get that you've processed that and you realize you have it now, but let's live life too.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that, like, when we come up with terms, I think labels are helpful for some people.
Yeah.
That people like to, I guess it can be empowering for some people, right? Like they
Yeah.
will say, oh, I
Mm-hmm.
know what this is called now. It's not me. It's not something
Yeah.
just wrong with me. There's this
Yeah.
thing. Now I
Yeah.
can attack it. And so it's freeing or
Mm-hmm.
empowering for them.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
some, I think in where we are in society, we want to label everything, or those
Yeah.
labels are constantly shifting and changing.
Mm-hmm.
But it's
Mm-hmm.
kind of like just, how the brain works. We want to make
Yeah.
sense of things, and we want to be able to
Yeah.
place things somewhere. And so it's like, well, this thing's
Yeah.
happening. Where do I put this? And
Yeah.
so part of what I try to do is really kind of talk about like a spectrum of an idea, so that, self
Yeah.
doubt is a normal thing. It's a normal process.
Right.
It's, maybe we go from healthy to unhealthy. And that's where imposter syndrome
Right.
is in the unhealthy end of that spectrum. So that,
Yeah.
when we're starting something new, or we're getting our first big gig on tour,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
we might be a little bit nervous. We might have a little bit of
Right.
self doubt because it's something we haven't done before. And I think that that's
Mm-hmm.
appropriate, right? Like, we shouldn't just go in
Mm-hmm.
overly confident when we haven't kind of, gotten in or done a thing yet. However,
Right.
once we've kind of done it for a while or exhibited some mastery, I think that we ought to be able to tell ourselves, like, I know how to do this. I'm
Mm-hmm.
good at this. I got this. And for
Right.
people with imposter syndrome, that doesn't really change. Like, they continue to feel like a fraud, regardless of
Mm-hmm.
how long they've been doing whatever the amazing thing is. They
Mm-hmm.
consistently wake up daily saying, oh my God, I'm going to be found out to not really be as talented as people think I
Right.
am.
Yeah, and I am one of those people, and I was trying to
Oh,
go through my own internal process, because I think some of it is because I love how you talk about a lot of, like, you have to weigh the evidence. Like, okay, it's time to start looking at, what you've done. I think also, I don't know if you've had this experience, but I think there's a lot of times to where I am an incredible people pleaser. I am a goodist. I can be a high achiever, which is a lot of people
yeah.
in, I know, the imposter space, in the chronic pain space, in the entrepreneur space.
Hmm.
So a lot of it is, I get that there's this evidence, but you don't see what I see from my perspective, because, as when I'm so dynamic and creative and expressive, you don't know what's actually going on inside my head, to where there's those crippling thoughts of, like, oh crap, or like, so then when people are like, but you kill it and it comes so easy, and you're like, yeah, I wish you knew.
You
Like,
don't know how the cake is made. You did not see the
you
kitchen after I created this cake.
yeah, yeah. How do you help people kind of navigate that?
Yeah, I love the way you spoke about it, because you're saying all the things. So, like,
Yeah.
there's a level of awareness and insight you're operating
Yeah.
with, where you recognize that some of this stuff is coming from, like, your past.
Yeah.
Like when you say you're a people pleaser, a goodist. And so what we do is we got to connect people to, where did this stuff develop? Like, how did I get
Yeah.
this? And so
Yeah.
looking at, some of the commonalities of, did you have parents that were really critical of you? Were you
Mm-hmm.
kind of the first person or only individual in your family to achieve the success you have?
Mm-hmm.
Did you not kind of get praised when you did something, or you only got praised when
Mm-hmm.
it was really amazing? These little
Mm-hmm.
things start to then shape you, right? And they send
Yeah.
messages to your brain about who you are. And if we
Yeah.
don't question those, we will adopt them as factor, as truth. And as we
Mm-hmm.
grow up, we can kind of continue to operate with that. And so,
Mm-hmm.
like, listening to you talk about it, it's like, oh man, I'm hearing kind of what was going on. And so
Mm-hmm.
you do this thing that most high achievers do.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like a cycle, right? Like,
Right.
you do something well as a high achiever, you kind of
Mm-hmm.
don't stay at a level long enough to really reach mastery. You kind of
Yeah.
elevate and level up. And so it feels like you're starting over, you don't know what you're doing. And some of that's true.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Also, the reality is that you've done things well. That's why you kind of keep moving up. And so kind of embrace that piece of
Mm-hmm.
it. But there's the other part of, like, what you were doing about, kind of being a high achiever and saying, like, well, you don't really see what's going on behind the scenes.
Right.
And in that, there's a meta message. And for those people that are listening and don't kind of know the difference, there's like messages, which is like the literal words that come out of my mouth in what I say. And then
Mm-hmm.
there's the meta message, which is like the underlying meaning
Mm-hmm.
of what I'm saying. And so when you say
Mm-hmm.
you don't know how the cake is made, you're telling people that somehow, for whatever reason, whatever you've been able to produce, the value of it or the quality of it is diminished
Hmm.
because it wasn't easy, or because you had to work
Right.
really hard, or because it was messy. And
Yeah.
people are not responding like that. So I'm saying the evidence is
Mm.
that people don't care. People don't care
Right.
about any of that stuff, because what
Totally.
they got was good. You're the
Mm-hmm.
only one that's caring about it. And what you're doing then
Mm.
is
Mm-hmm.
beating yourself up for not having a perfect kind of backstory or behind the scenes.
Right. Right. For sure. I think sometimes too, I think mastery means that, like, I'll feel like a master as I'm doing it, or like I'll just enjoy it because it'll become so natural.
Mm,
Like,
mm,
I
mm.
think sometimes that's what I think. Like, and sorry, I'm not trying to make this
No,
my
no,
own
it's all
personal
good. It's
Steve
all
on
good. No,
session.
absolutely. That's what we're here for. No, this is good. No, that's a
But
really good statement, right? Like, you're saying
mm-hmm.
that it's it's not easy, or it's not natural. And
Mm-hmm.
that tells me then, and I'm really big on language, so
Mm-hmm.
forgive me in
Yeah,
advance. I'm
yeah.
giving a disclaimer. Is that's kind of my entry point as I listen to people
Yeah.
talk. and then I kind of attack their language because your
Yeah.
language is
Yeah.
telling you a story and it's giving your brain a message.
Right.
And so when you're saying that, like, it's not natural,
Mm-hmm.
what you put conditions around what success or being good at something is
Mm.
supposed to look like.
Mm.
And I think the conditions you've
Mm.
put around that, are they appropriate or are they true?
Mm.
That
Mm. Yeah.
if you're good at something, it's supposed to be natural. It's not supposed to
Right.
contain a lot of work.
Right.
It's not supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to be
Mm-hmm.
easy.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that that's how
Mm.
success is accomplished for most people.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That makes sense. Because I think when we see people who feel like they're mastering something,
Mm-hmm.
when I think of it in the mind body space, like there's a lot of traits and a lot of habits that we've navigated that while they're not healthy, they have been beneficial and have served a purpose in some way. Being high achieving means that like you can still get all of your work done even if you're having a full body flare. Like
Right.
when you really think about the amount of things that you're able to get done, while having all of this pain or all of these different kinds of symptoms, it has benefited you up until some point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Do you feel like there's any of that in imposter syndrome? I don't want to say benefit, but it serves some kind of a purpose.
I think people have associated it with a benefit.
Yeah, right.
Erroneously.
Yeah.
Yeah. That
Right,
two
right.
things have happened and they've kind of said, well, it must be because of this. So that,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm worried about this, it doesn't allow me to be complacent and I don't get
Right.
kind of, lackadaisical or stagnant. And,
Totally.
you need that pressure to keep going.
Yeah.
And
Yes.
pressure does, allow us to grow and it can,
Yeah.
create diamonds. It can also burst pipes. So, it's
I
like,
got
I
it.
don't know that we
Yeah.
want negative pressure. Why
Yeah.
couldn't you motivate yourself from a positive place and acknowledge
Right.
some of the good? And I think when
Yeah.
you are kind of saying like, well, feeling like a fraud, even after I did something good, or
Right.
not wanting to lean into the fact that I'm talented,
Mm-hmm.
or making rules around, if I was truly talented,
Mm-hmm.
then I wouldn't have to work as hard, as though,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, people who are talented don't have to practice or don't have to learn
Right.
new things. Like,
Right.
that's not the
Right.
truth at all. I mean, if you
Right.
think about
Right.
musicians, you could be a natural talent. You still got to put
Right.
time and effort on, your instrument, whether that be your voice or,
Mm-hmm.
the saxophone or whatever it is.
Right.
You can't just show up to gigs and be like, I'm great and amazing, and I never
Totally.
touched it in the last 3 months.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, maybe.
Right.
I don't think it works like that.
Right.
And
Right.
I think when
Yeah.
we're saying like, I can operate in that way of where I'm unsatisfied or I'm unhappy with where I am, that's a good
Mm-hmm.
thing. I think long term it's not.
Right. Yeah. No, that makes sense. And you've talked a lot about, I love how you talk about inner bullies.
Mhm.
And mine's name is Sandra.
Sandra, I love it.
And
I love it. Oh,
she's
she's
wild.
not nice.
She's
She's
wild. I don't like her. Can you talk a little bit about that? Like what you call the inner bully and how that works?
Yeah. So for people that struggle with imposter syndrome, I part of what I'm trying to do when I talk about the language,
Yeah.
and I was talking about the meta message, is try to get people to be aware of the inner
Yeah.
dialogue that they have.
Yeah.
And the way I try to do that is talk about the inner bully, or kind of personify that voice,
Yeah.
to say like, it's not really you. That feeling you have is really your inner
Yeah.
bully, and it's beating
Yeah.
you up, and it's using your insecurities to make you feel like you're incompetent or don't have what it
Mm-hmm.
takes. And maybe if you give it a name and start to
Mm-hmm.
recognize what it is and what it's doing,
Mm-hmm.
then you will be able to separate yourself from it. And the goal
Yeah.
is to be able to say like, okay, I need to take a step back and listen to this language that's
Mm-hmm.
happening, this inner dialogue
Mm-hmm.
that's occurring in me. That's not really Stevan. That's
Right.
Jonathan that's saying that stuff. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan doesn't want me to be happy. He doesn't want me to feel good
Right.
about myself. Doesn't want me to
Right.
be super motivated and connected to all the accomplishments that I'm achieving.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, so when he says, "Hey, you know what? When you get invited on this podcast, you're going to sound like an idiot," that's not
Right.
true. He just wants me
Right.
to not feel good or feel
Mm-hmm.
confident about what I'm doing. Also,
Mm-hmm.
Jonathan never really presents with any evidence that supports the claims he makes. Like, I'm not going to be good. What are you basing that on?
Yeah.
People are reaching out for me to speak all the time. I'm speaking,
Right.
a couple times a week, different places.
Yeah.
That can't be because I suck. So,
Right.
that's why I asked, like, ask for
Right.
the evidence. Like, Jonathan,
Yeah.
show me that it sucks. Sandra,
Mm-hmm.
Sandra, show me that, Whitney's
Mm-hmm.
terrible. Like, show it to me. Where's it
Right.
at?
Right. Yeah. Which is so good. Do you find that people can actually find evidence? Like there have been times where like I've done something and people are like, hey, I'm gonna need you to do that again. That wasn't good.
Mm-hmm.
Like singing wise, or, I can take it into when a client is maybe coming slower along the process of healing. I'll start to be like, oh yeah, see, like all of your clients not everyone is pain
Yeah.
free now. So
Yeah.
then, I can start to make that about me and my
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
abilities. And then I'm like, see, there's evidence. Stevon, I have evidence.
Well, you have an instance.
Yeah.
Yeah. Evidence is more
Yeah.
of a collection of data
Yeah.
as opposed to a one-time kind of anomaly,
Mm,
right? And
that's
so,
good.
I think and this is something I get often is that,
Yeah.
this is what my clients do. The work I
Yeah.
do is not quick. It is slow.
Right.
I tell people you have to be relentless. And it just so happens that my petty is set up in a way to where I'm annoying enough
Petty
to
Betty.
engage you. Yeah. In your irrational thinking for a
Right.
very long time. It's fun for me. Like
Yeah. Yeah. You're the
yeah.
outer bully.
Yeah, that's who I've become, right? Like I am gonna beat you up for beating yourself up. Like
Mm-hmm.
that's what we're gonna do.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yeah, no, I mean it's interesting. People will try to provide an instance, and so I love it. I love it. Absolutely. So that
Mm-hmm.
happened, right? You sang off
Yeah.
key.
Yeah.
Producer says, "Hey, you got to do that over. That wasn't really
Yeah.
good." What does that mean about your overall abilities? And so you're
Right.
saying that because you sang off key, now you can't sing at all, or
Right.
that you're not good at it? It
Mm-hmm.
doesn't sound like most of the data or evidence supports that.
Mm-hmm.
Like, how did you
Mm-hmm.
get this gig? How have you had gigs in the past? How is it that
Right.
you know how to sing? How did you even end up in this booth recording?
Right.
If you couldn't hold a note, I don't think you make it this
Right.
far. So explain that
Right.
to me. Are you going to be
Totally.
Michael Jackson? Maybe not.
Right.
But if that's the bar, then
Yeah.
most everybody has failed.
Yeah. Right. Well, and I
Yeah.
also love you talk about you give an analogy of LeBron James. I'm a basketball fan too.
Oh,
And
nice.
so you talk about like how we don't expect LeBron James to play his best game every single time and then say he's not the GOAT. Like if
Right.
he has an off game, we're not saying, "Oh, man, he's lost it." Like there's something, right? But we do that to ourselves, and I know there's the whole conversation about like perfectionism and like you're saying
Hmm.
the bars that we place, for ourselves that we don't place for anybody else.
Right. Right. Right.
which
Right.
is
Say it
which is
again. We do
which is
not do this to
wild.
other people. Why are
Why
we
do we
treating
do it to
ourselves so
ourselves?
horribly? Right? You're
Yeah.
asking the same question. This is why I do this work. I'm trying to
Yeah.
figure that
Yeah.
out. I don't know
Yeah.
why you would tell yourself that you suck because you were imperfect, but other people not so much. So that
Yeah.
LeBron has paid a ton of money. At the
Mm-hmm.
end of the game, we want him to kind of have the ball, regardless of whatever people feel about
Right.
the recent outcome of the
Right.
season.
Right.
But you want LeBron on your team. You want
Yeah.
him to be there because you
Yeah.
say his talent is above most other people.
Right.
Doesn't mean he's perfect. Doesn't mean he doesn't miss shots. He doesn't make bad decisions.
Totally.
He might mess up. You still
Right.
want him on your team because he's that good.
Mm-hmm.
Why
Yeah.
are we saying we aren't allowed to be human for
Right.
ourselves, right? Like what we're
For
saying is that
sure.
you can't have any imperfection, or that
Yeah.
once you deviate from perfection, I don't know, what you do is worthless or not good. And I struggle with that.
Uh-huh. Well, and like he doesn't get paid per game. He gets paid for the season.
Yeah, yeah,
So they
yeah.
don't reevaluate his salary after every game.
No, it does not.
You know?
Great point. That
Like
exactly. Yeah,
yeah, like I'm thinking about that as you're talking like yeah, my pay doesn't get reevaluated after every gig or whatever. Like it's a set pay. And while I'm expected to perform a certain way, it's because they already know that I have the qualifications to deliver what it is that they're paying for.
Right.
And then, I mean, regardless of money, right? Like, not even that.
Or how about this? That like they are so happy with where he is right now with his game, they will pay him for future years if he just stays consistent.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's not even like, oh, we're paying you because, you know, each year you're going to be better. They're saying if you just stay this same way for the next 7 years, we'll give you all this money.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. That's wild. How much of it do you think is like you were saying, when we grow up? Because I think about my brother and myself, and we're very different. Like, he thinks he can do anything and everything, and he has no.
Maybe he can.
Listen, and he has no qualms. He's in like the psych field as well. So it's interesting when is there some point in which, like, that dialogue in which some of us have internalized, we now just create that to be our own dialogue, and that's when Sandra takes over? Is it because we've just heard it for so long and now we've internalized it? Now, you know, a lot of people know about neuroplasticity and the ways in which our neural pathways just like get strengthened. Is it because of that outer voice? Is it because how, like, for those of us who maybe live in unhealthy circles now, how do you deal with people working on internal dialogue when maybe they have a lot of family members or friends, or maybe they're in an unhealthy work environment where it is like yeah, you ain't nothing. Like, why do you think you're something? How do you navigate that?
That's a great question, because there are times when the reality is people are telling us, or we are getting information or feedback that suggests that we aren't good, or you know, we aren't getting rewarded and we feel like we did a good job. And how do we kind of reconcile that with how we see ourselves? And so for those instances, I it's the same kind of message. And you know, I think if I have a takeaway for folks listening, is that get curious with yourself. Right? Get curious about things. Ask more questions of yourself and of events and experiences, so that if you feel like you're doing a good job and, you know, the feedback you're getting is not, start to take stock of that. Okay, is there evidence to support that I'm not doing a good job? Why do I feel like I'm doing a good job? You know, is the person that's saying I'm not doing a good job, is that because they had expectations that were above what you know, is realistic for what can be done? Is that because they aren't qualified to recognize what a good job is? You know, start asking some questions. Don't just accept the fact that you know, somebody responded unfavorably as a fact about you, because there are times that we could end up in environments where people don't affirm who we are and all the good that we have. You know, you could be phenomenal at your job and not get a raise. You could ask for a raise and they still don't give you one. You could ask for a promotion and they don't give you one. And then they seemingly give it to someone else. You know, don't take that as something about you. That environment might not be one where they are going to allow your talents and abilities for you to be successful.
That's so good. Yeah. Curiosity. Yeah. Questioning. Why do we automatically make it about our lack and our inability? That's like, that's
because it could be, right? But I'm saying, like, why don't we just take a beat to analyze or assess it?
Right. Isn't it interesting, like, as you were talking, because we talk about curiosity a lot too in the mind body, of being curious more with symptoms, like just looking at them with a level of ease and just like, that's interesting that, you know,
I like it.
This migraine showed up after I had a conversation with Stevan, because I think he's so amazing. And afterwards I, you know, questioned, were those good questions? You know, like all of those kinds of things,
gives
right?
migraines. That's awesome.
Stevan gives migraines.
I'll take it.
But like, even like, as you're talking about curiosity, like, isn't it interesting how when we grew up, like, curiosity killed the cat, or like, I don't know, Curious George, like, it hasn't been something that's been encouraged, or like the curious kid who asks too many questions is like the annoying, like, let's give them something to appease them so they'll be quiet. Do you find people have a hard time being curious?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, people don't ask enough questions about their internal experience for me. The way I try to say it is that, you know, feelings aren't facts. And that a feeling should be a catalyst for you to do more investigation. So that when you have a feeling, it could be valid, it could be true,
Mm-hmm.
the first thing you should do is not just kind of automatically respond as though it is fact.
Yeah.
If outside of like a life or death situation,
Right.
take a second to say, okay, I'm having this feeling. What's happening? What's happening
Mm-hmm.
around me? What's
Mm-hmm.
happening with my thinking?
Mm-hmm.
What's happening with the experience I'm having of this other person or this environment?
Yeah.
And is this feeling appropriate for what's going on? And so
Mm-hmm.
that's the thing. And I think when people take a second to kind of get curious
Yeah.
about their feelings and what's happening for them, then they can
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, that I see what's happening. That's
Mm-hmm.
not actually true. So that, I have a
Yeah.
stomach ache now. Oh, that's because I have to give
Mm-hmm.
this speech and I don't know that
Mm-hmm.
I'm as prepared as I should be or I wanted to be.
Right.
And I'm worried that I'm
Right.
going to stumble over my words and make a fool of myself. That may not be true.
Yeah.
You can allow that stomach pain to persist, but also you don't need to give
Mm-hmm.
into it and be like, I don't need to speak now.
Totally. That's really good. Yeah, like just not taking it at surface level.
Mm-hmm.
It was interesting. When we navigate the idea of like nervous system regulation and our trauma responses, right? Fight, flight, freeze, and fawn. And
Mm-hmm.
my go-to, my creme de la creme.
My response of choice.
Yeah, what I'm confident about myself is,
Yeah.
like I totally go into shutdown mode. So disassociation,
Mm-hmm.
freezing, kind of just really numbing out to my life, and that's when Sandra goes hard on me, right?
Oh yeah, yeah,
and
yeah.
and it's interesting because a lot of this, I know a lot of the work is challenging the thoughts, like you were saying, like acceptance and or awareness, not acceptance,
Mm-hmm.
awareness. And one of my therapists used to say, awareness precedes change, right? Like you
Yep.
can't make change until we're aware of it. But I think a lot of times, like when my girl is chattering,
Oh,
it's
she's
when
on
I,
one.
ugh,
She
I'm
is
like,
on one.
shut up.
100%.
It's when my defenses are down too.
Mm-hmm.
So it's almost like this, Stevan, I don't want to do the work when I'm not in a place where I feel like I can navigate it in a healthy way.
Yeah,
Like, and I know
yeah.
that we all, it's like, even in the mind body stuff, it's all the time. They're just like, I don't want to deal with my thoughts. Like, I have a migraine. I want to sleep. I want to take Advil. And sometimes that's literally what you just should do to really love and have compassion for yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like this, we make it like it's work.
Yeah,
And it feels like just another thing I'm going to have to achieve.
yeah.
And then that's when she's like, see, you ain't doing nothing. You are nobody. You're not getting
Oh
anywhere in
wow.
life. And when you're tired and exhausted and in that like shut down, I'm like, yeah, tell
Yeah.
me what you think.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And it
She
almost
needs to be checked continuously.
continue. So so you say it's awareness, and then it's just, it's a daily, how do you then go from awareness to, I don't know, action or, I don't
Yeah,
know.
yeah. And so I think it's a thing of, think of it like a long game, right? It's more of a
Yeah.
marathon and not a sprint. I think people
We don't
want,
like that.
no, not at all. I tell you, you got to be relentless, right? Like
Yeah.
people are like, oh, well, at some point, Sandra's just going to stop and not do
Right.
the thing. She'll leave me alone. She'll see I'm
Right.
good and I'm okay. That's
Right.
not really how bullies work, right? Like they don't just kind of
No.
stop. You got to stop them. And
Right.
the thing about our inner bullies is that as you level up, they're going to level up. So they are constantly
Ah.
evolving and trying to morph into something new and find new ways to hurt you because
Dang.
that's their goal. And so if you're thinking that you're going to say one thing or you're going to just stop it, that's not really how it works. And I think allowing yourself or giving yourself compassion to say that, like, I'm going to have to be diligent about this. I'm going to have to be consistent in making sure that I am monitoring my thoughts and doing the work to make sure that I am, evaluating my feelings for validity and looking for evidence. And it's building those skills so that they become second nature, so that it's
Yeah.
not work to do it, right? Like, if
Yeah.
you first start out running and running a mile seems like, oh my God, that's far. After you do that for, 10, 12 weeks,
Yeah.
you're running 2 miles and you're like, oh, that wasn't that bad. And then what you'll notice is that you get
Right.
faster and you can go farther. And I think that's the thing that you have to kind of implement or kind of
Mm-hmm.
understand this process is it's going to feel like work at the beginning because you are developing a new skill that you haven't really
Yeah.
mastered yet. And so if
Yeah.
you're saying that you want easy
Mm-hmm.
for good results, maybe
Yeah.
that's an unrealistic expectation you're
Mm-hmm.
putting on, getting free from pain or from something that's
Mm-hmm.
harming you, or whether that
Mm-hmm.
pain is physical or
Right.
emotional.
Right. Yeah. And I think a lot of people really struggle with it because we don't want to do the work.
Hmm.
Like life is hard and tiring, and it's like, really, I gotta,
Yeah.
when I'm in my just very human, I'm over everything. I'm like, the last thing I want to do is work. But I like how you're saying it's like it's reframing and reevaluating it, because I've unconsciously been doing the work to emphasize these negative thought patterns my whole
Hmm.
life. It just
Right.
hasn't felt like work because I've been doing it for so long. So now I really
Yeah.
don't, it's not work anymore. It's
Right.
just it's second nature.
And it doesn't always have to happen in the moment. So like how you mentioned
Yeah.
about a migraine and,
Yeah.
all I want to do is just, turn this room into darkness and kind of close my
Mm-hmm.
eyes and not have to, I just want to relax and let stuff kind of calm
Yeah.
down. Like you said, pop a few
Yeah.
Advils and be okay. That's
Yeah.
fine.
Mm-hmm.
Also put it on your agenda that,
Yeah.
Sandra, you got me, or, you spit that stuff, but I'm gonna come back and talk to you in a second. Once I feel a
Yeah.
little bit better, I'm gonna
Yeah.
let you have this round. But
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna come back and we're gonna have a chat, and I'll show you what's
Mm-hmm.
up. And I think that's how you
Mm-hmm.
got to approach it. Is that
Yeah.
if Sandra gets one day or gets a few punches in, doesn't mean
Right.
you're actually losing. You get an
Right.
opportunity to kind of
Yeah.
take a break, take some respite, and say, all right,
Mm-hmm.
now that this migraine's gone, let me look
Mm-hmm.
at what was really going on and let me understand this better.
Totally. That's good. Yeah. And if you're listening and your name is Sandra, love
There
you.
you go.
Nothing against the
Sandra.
Sandras of
Yeah, Sandra's of the world,
of
you
the community.
bullies.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Love y'all. So you also have a lot of wisdom about, and we've talked about this before, but just radical self compassion. No, self
Hmm.
acceptance.
Oh
Radical
yeah,
self
yeah, yeah, yep,
acceptance.
yep, yep.
I'm doing a course right now on self compassion. But
Same
it's
family.
same family, and it's really interesting because we've been going through the different misconceptions around self compassion.
Hmm.
Because it's interesting, and a lot of this is from the amazing Kristen Neff, who does a lot with self compassion. But like a lot of the misconceptions that we've been learning is like, if I give myself a break, I'm going to become lazy and a slob, and or if I don't give myself, in faith based communities, like if I don't, beat myself up over something I did wrong, I'm just going to become this horrible, sinful,
Oh boy.
human who just is
Oh.
the worst in life, right? So it almost feels like our inner bully, we think it's a way in which we're keeping ourselves contained.
Oh,
We're
like it's a
like on,
control.
like it's a control because we would not know what to do with
Yeah.
ourselves if we just
Unchecked, I'm
loved
going to be
ourselves.
horrible to
Yeah.
everyone else that comes into contact with me.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Yeah,
But what
yeah.
is to you, like, what does radical self acceptance mean?
So for me, the way I think of it is that, radical self acceptance, the radical part is the idea that you're able to hold two truths about yourself at the same time. That
Mm,
the antidote for me to imposter syndrome is the idea that you can let go of the idea that you have to be perfect or be all talented or all knowing
mm-hmm.
or
Right.
all the things.
Yeah.
And that while you're still working to be a better version of yourself, you can be
Mm-hmm.
absolutely thrilled and happy with where you
Mm,
are in life. So those two
mm,
opposing things that, you can be satisfied or feel good about what you've done once you've done it,
mm-hmm.
as opposed
Mm-hmm.
to along the journey. And I'm saying, why can't you be
Mm,
happy about the steps that it takes to get to the final product? Because that's
mm-hmm.
important. If they don't happen,
Mm-hmm.
you don't get to the goal. And so celebrate
Right.
those, be happy about those, pat yourself on the back as you're
Mm,
still making progress to get to where you want to be.
that's really good. When you were first saying it, I was thinking about like self love, and
Hmm.
for women, I think for men too, they talk like there was a long time they're like, just stand in front of a mirror naked and just tell your body you love it.
Yep.
Like to all the
Yep.
parts that, you don't like where they're at yet. You just, and I always hated that. Cause,
Right. Right.
cause I was like, this isn't changing anything. Like by me standing here just saying, I love you, cellulite. Like I don't.
Because I don't love you, cellulite.
Like
I
I'm
don't.
not believing what I'm saying, but I really like how you have that because it's like being okay with where I'm at now. Because I do think we are like this obsessed culture of like, I always have to be better at every moment of every day. If I'm not
Yep.
growing, I'm not nothing, you
Yeah, like you're
know?
going backwards. It's almost like, if you stand still for a second, then everybody's leaving you behind, or, you're going
Yeah,
in the wrong direction almost.
totally. It's almost like an addiction to not being able to just be present.
Oof. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
feels like, because
It's kind of like how you were talking about in the faith-based community, of where you were saying that, like,
yeah,
you aren't constantly berating yourself then, for things that you've done wrong, or where you've been
yeah,
imperfect, or,
yeah.
like I would like to say, where you've been human.
Right, right,
And then somehow you're going to allow yourself to be a more terrible, horrible person, uh,
right.
and just give in to sin. And I guess I'm thinking that, one, my experience is that if you're concerned about that at all, you're probably
Mm-hmm.
not going to end up
Mm-hmm.
doing that. Like, I don't
Totally.
know that, serial killers were ever worried about becoming a serial killer. Like, that's not the thing.
Right,
Like, you're not going to become that.
right.
So, like, why are we operating like that's a real truth for you? And,
Mm,
be aware of the perfection you're saying. You're saying that, like, I
yeah,
must always be doing good, or I must always not sin. And if I don't do that, then I'm a horrible, terrible person, and I'm
totally.
screwing up and I'm messing up. And I guess if that's the message you're giving yourself for being human,
Mm,
then
yeah,
you've made it a very small, I guess, window for you to be happy with yourself.
for sure. Yeah, and what's that saying? Like, what we resist will persist.
Hmm.
So it's
Hmm.
like, do you find like if we're so focused on, can you go too far and get like too focused on like the inner bully rather than like, let's focus on the ways in which we can have like radical self acceptance. More so, is it a dance?
Yeah, yeah. So it's a balance. So it's like,
Yeah,
the inner bully's going to do its thing.
yeah.
I don't know that you need to give a ton of time and attention, or power or energy to it. And I
Okay.
think that's what happens when people start to have those feelings of fear and feeling like they're going to be
Yeah,
found out to be a fraud, or sometimes it
yeah,
turns into physical symptoms. I'm
yeah,
saying, yeah, the inner bully is going to say stuff. That doesn't mean you have to believe it. Somebody could say,
yeah.
Stevon, you suck as a therapist. Okay, what does that really mean?
Mm-hmm.
What is it about that person that gives them the right to, I don't know, determine my value or the quality of therapist that I am?
Mm-hmm.
Again, start to ask questions, start to get curious. And so,
Mm-hmm.
people can have unfavorable opinions of me, or
Right.
unfavorable reports. I'm sure there are some clients that I haven't helped. By the time I stopped working with couples, I was like, I don't know that I'm doing any good with couples. But
Mm-hmm.
that
Yeah.
doesn't mean I'm a terrible therapist. And so I'm saying, don't,
Yeah.
allow imperfection to, I guess, be the method by which you judge the quality of your performances.
Mm. Yeah. That's really good. Do you encourage people to navigate this like within community? Like, is this something where like I should be sharing, my inner thoughts with people? Like, can it be helpful? Can it be not that helpful? I guess
Oh
it
no, I
depends on
follow what you're
who.
saying. I think it
Yeah.
is helpful because
Mm-hmm.
most people don't share it, and they live in a bubble.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like you
Yeah.
said, you see behind the curtain, nobody else does. And
Yeah.
so, even I think you phrased it really, really well when you said, "Yeah, but they don't know what's going on inside my head when I'm
Yeah.
doing this thing." So I sang
Yeah.
this valid, and it was great, and everybody loved it. And in my head, I'm like, "Oh
Mm-hmm.
my God, I think I missed that note. Did I say the wrong word? I forgot the word there."
Mm-hmm.
All this
Mm-hmm.
stuff, and nobody
Yeah.
cares, right?
Yeah. Right.
I think it's a good thing to be able to share some of that stuff. And so, one of the activities, or kind of interventions I try to have people do is what I call
Mm-hmm.
collecting data. And
Mm-hmm.
it's really getting you to ask people what your top five strengths are. And you ask a
Mm.
variety of people that you've known a long time, a little bit,
Yeah.
know in different settings. So not always just your best friend and family,
Right.
but then getting them to do that so that you can get an idea of, like, hey, here's what you're putting out. And so you live in this
Yeah.
bubble where you think that you aren't doing as great and that people are noticing stuff and they're just being nice and not saying it. Then how come all
Right.
these people kind of see the same thing, or you start to see
Mm.
themes kind of appear about you? And that's really what
Mm-hmm.
you're putting out. And
I
so,
love that.
you can feel bad, or you can focus on the fact that, you forgot one of the words, or maybe you missed a note.
Mm-hmm.
But what people are saying is that you're really good at this thing. And
Yeah.
you know, maybe you can go up against 5 people or 10 people, and you're the only one that's right. But I mean, if enough people are
Right.
saying this thing, then at what point are you going to believe it?
At what point?
Yeah.
At what point?
Yeah. How
Yeah.
many
Yeah.
opportunities do you get to sing? How many, people
Mm-hmm.
download your songs? How many
Mm-hmm.
people make requests, or how many people tell you
Mm-hmm.
you did a good job, or,
Yeah.
shows that sell out, all the things. How many of
Yeah.
those things need to happen before you can say, okay, I may not be the best at this. Also,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not the worst.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah. So can comparison be helpful in some ways, or is the whole comparison game not helpful? I know it's not
So,
helpful.
so the way I like to say it is that it's negative comparison.
Yeah.
Comparison is just a method by
Yeah.
which we say things are similar or they are
Mm-hmm.
dissimilar, right? Like they are not
Mm-hmm.
the same. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
it's when we start to say, well, this is different, or I'm different
Yeah.
from this other thing.
Yeah.
So there's something wrong with me. And that's where I have the
Mm,
problem, is that you are now
right.
giving yourself a negative evaluation based on
Yeah.
difference. And difference just says that they're
Mm,
not the same.
mm-hmm.
Sprite and Coke are not the same beverage. What does that
Mm-hmm.
really mean?
Right.
Does that mean one's better than the other? I don't know. You love Coke? Yeah. You hate Sprite? Sure. But I
Right.
don't know that that's like actual, objective evidence.
Totally.
You know, I might not like country music. Somebody else might
Mm-hmm.
love country music. I might,
Mm-hmm.
love jazz. Somebody might hate
Mm-hmm.
jazz. Does
Right.
jazz suck? Does country music suck? Or is it the best genre of music? It all depends.
Right.
But when you're saying that, well, one is better than the other because of this, then
Yeah.
that's where the issue is.
Yeah. Well, and like when you compare, I'm sure you have compared yourself to other therapists or maybe the
Mhm.
outcomes of other therapists. And so what you're saying is don't necessarily look at, okay, this other, therapist who deals with couples has this rate of success because it's none of the couples are the same.
Right.
Or,
Right.
in this space of the mind body, I mean, there's so many people who are technically way more experienced and like probably could help people better. Some people have better than I can, but
Hmm.
my own experience of healing from chronic pain, like nobody could take that from me.
Right. Right. Right.
Like, so
Right.
that's not even a comparison of like, did that person heal better than I did? When I
Yeah.
lean into, because when I get into that of like, oh my gosh, there's phenomenal people in this space. Who are me,
Hmm.
to say, come be with me. But when I really realized like, if I found healing in this place, and rather than coming at like I need to be the best person ever to
There you
talk
go.
about this concept in the world,
Yep.
it's just like, what is my little piece of the corner of the earth that like I get to impact and help people and
Hmm.
just help bring life to some people, even if I'm not the best at it. If they're symptom free, does that matter?
Yeah,
you
it
know
matters a lot, right? Like you help somebody, that matters, full
yeah,
stop. And I
yeah.
think I think that's the thing, is that, like,
Mm-hmm.
we're comparing to see where we fall.
Yeah.
How good are we? And I
Mm-hmm.
guess, one, people ought to get comfortable not being the best, or even not
Yeah.
being good at something, and that being okay.
Mm.
What,
Yeah.
again, what does
Yeah,
that
that's
really
hard.
mean? What does that
Right.
mean? If LeBron James isn't the best 3-point shooter, does that mean he sucks at basketball?
Right.
And
Right.
I think that's what I'm wanting people to start to question,
Yeah, that's
because we
good.
can look at things and say, well, there are people who are more skilled than me. I have a
Yeah.
master's level therapist. There are PhDs out here. There are people
Right.
who are doing daily research, on
Mm-hmm.
imposter syndrome, and the women who founded imposter syndrome were like
Right.
more expert than me and all that stuff. And it's like, okay, what does that really mean? Am I helping
Mm-hmm.
people? The people who I'm helping
Mm-hmm.
are overwhelmed and satisfied with what I'm doing. Why can't I be happy with that?
That's good. Yeah. Can you plug your workbook, your journal
Oh yeah,
that
for
you
sure.
have created? Because I know that you're getting a lot of heat for it.
Yeah, yeah.
In the best way. In the
In
best
the
way.
best way. Yeah.
Yes.
Apparently, it causes people anxiety for them to have to engage in some of the activities. Yeah, yeah. So
Yes.
I have a journal. I call it it's silencing your inner bully. It's an
Mm-hmm.
acknowledgement journal for imposter syndrome. It's I say journal. It's journal workbook.
Yeah.
It does have some prompts for you to be able to write down
Yeah.
and explore some of the
Mm-hmm.
ideas that aren't being stated, but you're operating off
Yep.
of, like your definition of
Yeah.
success or failure. What you think about yourself. Why it's difficult for you to give yourself compliments, so sorts of things.
Mm-hmm.
And then there are activities where like you have to, put negative thoughts on trial or, like I said, collecting data. And so it has activities for you to actually engage in stuff where you are practicing some of these tools to make sure that you are, not allowing your Sandra to kind of take over
Mm-hmm.
and run your life.
Right. Right. Calm down, Sandra.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's so good. I have it and I love it.
Oh, thank you. Yeah.
Oh yeah, so I'll make sure to link it. I think we should all be doing work like this all the time.
Awesome. Awesome.
It's so helpful. Well, thank you so much. I so appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me
This
on.
was
And
so fun and slightly a therapy session for me. So thank you.
yeah, yeah, no, I don't feel that. You're quite welcome. I
Appreciate
will
it.
invoice you later.
Yeah. I just
No,
bring
no,
people
no,
on
no.
for free therapy. Really, is what it is.
That's
What this
awesome.
podcast is.
Yeah. That's what my podcast is, right? Yeah,
It's just,
no, exactly.
yeah.
I mean, no, I appreciate it. This was absolutely fun. Thank you for letting me
Yay.
plug my stuff and giving me an opportunity to kind of have voice
Oh my
and
gosh.
share in this space as well.
Yeah. Is there anything else like that you're doing and coming up that you want to share? I'll put your website and everything, of course, too.
Yeah. All my stuff is kind of linked on my website.
Yeah.
Like I said, I have the journal. I
Yeah.
also have a podcast called How to
Yeah.
Talk to High Achievers
Yes.
about anything,
Yes.
where people kind of share their story about stuff
Mm-hmm.
and struggles with imposter syndrome and their imposterism as they're doing amazing things, and I'll kind of break it down in the most Steve-on way possible.
Right.
No velvet gloves over here.
Yes.
Yeah, we go right to it. Yeah, that's about it. I mean, I'm speaking places.
Amazing.
I'm going to be speaking at the CAMP conference, which is kind of conference for therapists that's coming up this weekend. And just got back from San Luis Obispo and podcast and things. So,
Come on.
yeah, find
Doing
me.
all the things. Find him. Yes.
Yeah.
Amazing. Well, thank you.
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.